Hey guys, welcome back to part 2 of the Treaty of Versailles. Last session you looked at what was the treaty, who were the people involved, some of the motives for the decisions that will be made. Today we're going to be looking at the punishments for Germany and the mandate system that's going to replace the Ottoman control in the region. As always, please remember to reach out and let me know if you need anything. If you have questions, please reach out. All right, so today, of course, we're looking at the German reparations, the punishments on Germany, and the mandate system that will replace the Ottoman Empire in the Middle East. If you missed the first part, go back and look at the previous video that looked at the motives and the League of Nations. So today you're looking at how Germany was punished, including the reparation systems in the military, and you should be able to explain the reasons for the mandate system and what it was. So remember we said last time that France wanted to crush Germany. They wanted to completely obliterate any possibility that Germany could come back and ever attack France again. One way to think about the punishments that will be imposed on Germany through the Treaty of Versailles is the acronym BRAT. Essentially, Germany was treated like a bratty child that had to be punished and reprimanded. So the first part of that's looking at blame. Germany had to accept the blame for the war. Now, you may be thinking Germany didn't actually start the war. That guy, Franz Ferdinand, got assassinated in Sarajevo, and Austria and Serbia declared war first. Well, you're right. But Germany was forced to accept blame through what became known as the War Guilt Clause in the Treaty of Versailles. And that's in this bottom section of the slide. The Allied and associated governments affirm, and Germany accepts, the responsibility of Germany and her allies for causing all the loss and damage to which the Allied and associated governments and their nationals have been subjected as a consequence of the war, despite the fact that Germany didn't start it. Because Germany became the face of the war with trench warfare, partly, Germany was forced to be blamed. They had to accept the blame and be internationally ridiculed for it. Next part is the reparations. Reparations is essentially money or fines that were used to pay for the destruction caused by the war, so pay for damages, help pay for the pensions for the Allied soldiers, for any widows, and for the families. It was about $33 billion in 1919. If those same reparations had been imposed today, it would have been about $400 billion. That's a lot of money. Now, some of the debt eventually gets kind of negotiated by the wayside, but Germany just finished their last interest payments on these reparations in 2010, 10 years ago, 90 years after the war ended. The third part is the army. So the army and the military. Germany had limits put on the army. They were forbidden to have an army over 100,000 men. This would make Germany's army much, much smaller than every other country in the world that had a standing army. Excuse me. And it was designed to prevent Germany from being able to attack, to build up and actually be able to successfully attack any other country. Germany was also not allowed to have submarines or an air force. Germany had become known during World War I for using their U-boats, their submarines, to attack shipping and military traffic in the North Atlantic. Germany was also prohibited from making or buying any weapons or war materials. This part of the treaty was designed to make Germany powerless to defend itself realistically and to attack anybody else. The last part's looking at the T, the territory. Germany was forced to give up territory after World War I. the territory of Alsace and Lorraine. This is that section, if you look at the map in pink, right here on the west side of Germany, the left side when you're looking at the map. Germany had to give up all its colonies in Africa and the Pacific. So if you look at this map at the bottom, all those sections that are blue here were given to other countries. And the Rhineland, this territory in green, again on the west side of Germany, was occupied by Allied troops. It was essentially a no man's land, a barrier between Belgium and France and Germany. These territories, the Rhineland, Alsace, and Lorraine, are some of the first areas Germany will end up moving into at the beginning of World War II. But Germany had to give them up, and they were going to be very resentful of this fact. So, summing up Germany's punishment, Germany was blamed for the war. They had to accept that war guilt clause that everybody's going to say it's Germany's fault. It's your fault we had to fight this war, so we're punishing you for it. Germany had to pay reparations. They had to pay money to Britain, France, the US, and some of the other allied countries. Germany was not allowed to have a large army or build up their military. And Germany lost territory. So Germany is losing face. They're going to be very resentful of this fact. They're going to be resentful that we didn't start the war. We didn't deserve this. They saw it as a diktat. That's a German term for dictate, a dictated peace. There was no German representative at the Treaty of Versailles. Think back to the Berlin Conference when European nations divided up Africa. No African representatives were there. They had no say. Germany had no say in the punishments that will be given to them as part of the Treaty of Versailles. And in fact, Germany was threatened with yet another war if they refused to sign the treaty. The Germans thought the treaty would be based off Wilson's 14 points. Not even close. I mean, it was mentioned that military would be reduced, but Wilson thought that was going to be a global reduction, not just Germany. Most Germans thought the war guilt clause was unjustified. The British and French had been involved in the alliances that led to the declarations of war. The triggering event was, in fact, in Sarajevo, part of the Austrian Empire at the time. Losing territory, the military losses. Most people thought this was just a little too severe. That is overkill in terms of punishment. And a lot of Germans thought the economy would be crippled, unable to grow, unable to thrive by having to pay reparations. And they're absolutely correct in this regard. The last part of the treaty that we're going to look at today is looking at how the map is going to be redrawn. The map will be changed in Europe and the Middle East. So Austria-Hungary will break up, and you'll look a little bit more at that later. Some German territories in the east were used to create Poland. Germany's border with France was demilitarized and occupied. And some of the territory in the western part of Russia, which had signed a peace treaty earlier on when they left after the Russian Revolution, will also be used to create some of those new countries in Eastern Europe. But what we're going to focus on today is what happens to the old Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire is down here in what is today Turkey and the Middle East region, gets divided up. The Ottoman Empire had the bad luck to be on the losing side of the war. They had already been in decline prior to World War I, and World War I just hastened the decline and created a situation where now European nations are going to dictate what happens to the empire as it breaks up. So some countries will get their independence. For example, Turkey. This is when Turkey becomes an independent country. Others, such as Palestine, Iraq, and Syria, will be given to Britain and France as territory to control, as mandates. That's what they were called. So the mandate system, it's the system created within the League of Nations to divide up how the Ottoman Empire was controlled and also the former German colonies. We're going to focus on the impact in the Middle East because that's the part that's best known, and that's the part that's going to have one of the longest lasting influences in terms of world history. So to create a mandate, first thing you have to do is remove the sovereignty or control of the country or empire that had previously controlled the region. Well, the Ottoman Empire lost the war, so easy peasy. No more Ottoman Empire, we're dividing it up. And then the power of the different regions is going to be transferred. So some areas will become independent, and then some countries will be given to one of those winning nations to control and administer. The idea was that these countries would be working towards eventual independence and joining the League of Nations. This is not going to be a quick process. It'll take a while, and in some cases, it's a little bit reluctant. So let's look at some of the examples based on this map. Turkey. Turkey becomes an independent republic. This is the first time we see the independent country of Turkey as it exists today. Iran. Modern day Iran is created as we recognize it today. Remember, this was the region that we used to call Persia. They become an independent nation. Mesopotamia, or what we know today as Iraq, is given to British control. Technically, the Iraqi king retains direct control, but they follow British advice. It's a lot like the spheres of influence that were in China. Heavy economic influence and control. The British wanted the oil. Iraq and Kuwait had oil reserves. There's a lot of oil in the Middle East. Think about it today. Still very important region for oil. So economic influences were heavy coming from the British. Palestine. We know part of Palestine today because of the Israel-Palestinian conflict. This mandate gave the British direct access to Middle Eastern oil because it was coastline access that they could get to from the Mediterranean Sea. Starting in the 1920s, we will see Britain beginning to support the creation of a Zionist or Jewish homeland. This will become important in the years between World War I and World War II as Germany begins to increase its anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish policies, and Jewish people try to leave Europe. A lot of them head for Palestine. Syria will be controlled by France, and it will be very oppressive, harsh control. It's much harsher control than what we'll see under the British mandates. The French in this region wanted to control everything and wanted to exploit the resources. The French essentially treated Syria like any other colony that they controlled. So some of the effects of the mandate system. It divided the Middle East into many different political units in order to stop national movement and nationalist identities. If you could stifle those nationalist identities, those nationalist movements that had sparked the breakup of empires in Europe, that would allow European nations, specifically Britain and France now in the region, to have more access to the resources. Specifically, European nations wanted access to the oil reserves. Israel, that was part of Palestine, will eventually become the permanent homeland for the Jewish people. Israel, as we recognize it today, will be created in 1947 after World War II. This begins the formal Israeli-Palestinian conflict that still continues today and that we'll look at a little bit later. Some of the positive effects, depending on which point of view you're looking at: more technological improvement, discovery of oil reserves, more industrialization in the region, more international trade. There had been trade before, but it increases the amount of trade. Increased standard of living, more resources are available, and agriculture is shifted to try and improve it, to try and make it better. Some of the problems, though, it destroys pan-Islamic aspirations. Pan-Islamic or pan-Arabic aspirations is looking for the unification of these Arab Islamic groups. That's not going to be able to happen under European control, and it's still not something that's fully been realized today, even though there have been various movements in that respect. Old culture gets destroyed. We saw this happen in Africa and Asia with imperialism. European countries come in and they try to impose their own culture, their own values. And this has the effect of messing up and destroying sometimes the culture that had existed beforehand. Peculiarly shaped Middle East states. I'm going to go back to the map for a minute to show you what I mean. So, random border lines. Some of them are straight, some of them are not so straight. Some of the countries kind of zigzag around. This is the European countries drawing borders to fit them where they want them. Because if the European powers who controlled the map that they're creating as part of the mandate system, if they draw the borders just right, they can ensure that Britain's going to have access to their oil. They can ensure that the resources that they want will be there. Religious differences start to become more pronounced. Part of that becomes part of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and the type of agriculture changes. We do start to see focus on crops that will make more money versus crops that will just feed families in a town. So, thinking again about what the Treaty of Versailles has, we saw the creation of the League of Nations, this international peacekeeping organization that was designed to prevent another global war, like what we had just seen with World War I. Germany and Russia were not a part. The US never joined the League of Nations. Germany was forced to give up territory and give up its colonies. Germany's military was restricted, and Germany was forced to pay reparations and take the blame for the war. Now, this still did not address all the problems. None of the allied nations that had won the war were required to demilitarize or give up their colonies. That had been part of Wilson's 14 points. They weren't required to do that. The treaty never addressed the alliances that had been a problem leading up to World War I, nor did it guarantee freer trade. And the treaty was so severe, so harsh, that it makes it impossible for Germany to rebuild from the war. So what we're going to see when World War II starts is Germany has still not gotten out of the hole that it was in after World War I. 20 years later, Germany's still trying to get out of that hole. And this resentment from the treaty really does, it's not the only reason that we see problems come up again later that lead to World War II, but it does create resentment in Germany that allows people like Adolf Hitler to take advantage of the situation and come to power. It creates something that they can blame. So, just to wrap up, some of the immediate effects, an entire generation of Europeans is killed or wounded. There's a huge population decrease because of World War I. Remember, we said about 22 million people were killed within this war. Major dynasties and empires that had existed for centuries collapse. Germany collapses in terms of its power. Austria-Hungary will be broken up. Russia had its revolution. We see the creation of new countries through the mandate system and through the breakup of the old empires and the League of Nations. Long term, though, some of you are already familiar with aspects of World War II, so you might be thinking ahead. Nations feel bitter and betrayed, especially Germany, but even Italy. Italy thought it should have gotten more out of the peace agreement than it did. Japan thought it should have gotten more territory. out of the peace agreement than it did. Those forces that helped lead to the war, nationalism, alliances, competition between nations, they still exist, and they will still be causing problems for years to come. All right, so hopefully this helped you understand the last few sections of the Treaty of Versailles. The fact that Germany is going to be incredibly harshly punished, and that the Ottoman Empire will be divided up into the mandate system. If you've got any questions at any point about anything, please don't hesitate to reach out. Let me know you've got questions so I can help you out.